This is a map of Chicago's metro system. Known as the L, it is regarded by many as one of the most well-functioning metros in the US. It connects practically every part of the city and has a daily ridership of approximately 420,000, over 127 million annually. But this is only one of the aspects that make Chicago such a well-designed city. Because beyond the trains, Chicago's entire layout feels unusually intentional. Well, because it is. The city is built on an almost perfect grid with numbered streets and a logical address system that makes navigation much simpler compared to most other US cities. On top of that, the downtown is one of the densest collections of skyscrapers in the world. But instead of being cut off by highways or industrial zones, it's directly connected to neighborhoods, transit, and the lakefront. The city's density is also extremely well balanced. It's not super dense like New York, but also not anything like the suburban sprawl we see in cities like Atlanta or Dallas. Overall, Chicago is one of the most well-designed cities in America, which also makes it one of the most livable. So, how exactly did Chicago end up like this? And what choices set it apart from the flawed urban planning typical of other US cities? To answer that, we have to go back to the early 1900s. You see, Chicago had been one of the world's fastest growing cities for decades, with its population increasing from only 4,000 in 1837 to approximately 1.7 million by the 1900s, making it the second most populated city in the US. But while its economy was booming, it was also dealing with many of the problems of rapid, unplanned growth. Overcrowded tenement housing, inadequate sanitation, polluted waterways, traffic congestion, and a patchwork of poorly coordinated streets and rail lines. During this period, starting in the late 19th century, continuing into the 20th century, urban planning in America had started to become increasingly important. One of the main pioneers of this was architect Daniel Burnham, who in 1909 published the Plan of Chicago. This was one of the first modern city plans in the US, and it proposed something radical for the time. Wide boulevards, parks linked by green corridors, and a protected lakefront that would remain, as stated, forever open, clear, and free. In order to relieve congestion, the plan also reorganized the rail network and street grid, including adding new streets like, for example, Wacker Drive and Ida B. Wells Drive. The overall goal was to simply make Chicago a more livable place, which in turn would improve efficiency among workers. While not every part of the plan was realized, its core ideas still define Chicago today, with the most noticeable direct fruition being the 25 miles of lakefront that till this day serves as public parkland for the people of Chicago, which is something almost no other city in the US can claim. Aside from the lakefront, the city has over 600 public parks in total that span more than 8,800 acres combined. As I've already mentioned, Chicago's street grid is one of the most crucial aspects of its design. In fact, according to a study from 2019, it is the closest approximation of a single perfect grid out of the 100 major world cities that was used in the study. When the city was largely rebuilt after the Great Fire of 1871, planners leaned heavily into a perfectly ordered system of streets and addresses. However, for those who are not from Chicago, it can be difficult to interpret at first. This is a map showing how the grid is divided into north, south, east, and west. At the very center is the intersection of State Street and Madison Street, which acts as the 0 point for the entire system. From there, addresses increase in a perfectly logical way. Every 800 numbers equals 1 mile. So if you're at 3200 North, you know you're exactly 4 miles north of Madison. But Chicago's design doesn't just stop with the street grid. Just as important is how the city built its transit system to layer on top of it. The Chicago L, short for elevated, first opened in 1892 and has since grown into the third largest rapid transit system in the US, only behind New York and Washington. Today, it has 8 lines stretching over 165 miles of track and serving 145 stations. Even though not all of it is elevated, despite its name, the elevated part covers a much greater length than other cities that also have it, like New York, Boston, or Philly. While these cities started off with mostly elevated lines, Most of them gradually replaced large portions with subways to reduce noise and free up street space. Chicago, on the other hand, kept most of its system elevated, largely because the city is built on swampy soil, making subway construction far more expensive and technically difficult. One of the most distinctive features of this system is the Loop, a rectangular track of elevated rail that circles the central business district. This design not only gave the area its name, the Loop, but also became the backbone of the entire network, with nearly every line connecting into it. Because of this, even if you live miles away in the neighborhoods, you can usually get into downtown pretty quickly and transfer to another line without much complication. It also allows for direct access to the city's two airports, O'Hare and Midway, with the blue and orange lines. The density is another thing that makes Chicago so livable. Have a look at this map showing the density of the city. As visible, the neighborhoods around the Loop, the near north side and the lakefront in particular, are some of the densest in the country, with tens of thousands of people per square mile. But the density gradually steps down as you move outward. This creates a kind of layered density that supports a strong transit system, walkable neighborhoods, and vibrant street life, while still giving residents space in the form of two flats, gray stones, courtyard buildings, and other multiplexes. This is exactly the type of housing that in many cities across the US is being referred to as the missing middle, simply because it is absent in most of the cities in the country, as suburbia has been favored ever since the 1950s. In practice, this balance means you get the best of both worlds. A city where transit is efficient and local businesses thrive thanks to the concentrated populations, but also one where you can find quieter residential blocks and even backyards just a short distance from downtown. Basically, Chicago is dense enough to function like a true world city, but not so dense that it becomes overwhelming, at least in most parts. This density also plays a role in keeping Chicago's housing market relatively affordable, especially considering its size and importance. As of mid-2025, the median home price sits at around $360,000, which is more than half of that in New York, and also less than the likes of Miami or Atlanta. Of course, there are many reasons for this, like high property taxes, weather, and slower population growth, but Chicago also has a large supply of diverse housing, which provides more entry points for renters and buyers. The mix of density and housing variety helps buffer the market against extreme price spikes seen in other major metros, making Chicago more resilient to shifts in demand. So, Chicago's story is largely shaped by the choices that define it as a city, and that's why, more than a century later, it still stands out as one of the best designed and most livable cities in America. Thanks for watching.